afternoon. There's a lot of people here. My name is Jenelle Riley. I'm so pleased to be here today for this SAG Foundation conversation with Matt Damon. When people say there are no old-fashioned movie stars left anymore, I simply say Matt Damon. He has starred in films like Good Will Hunting, The Talented Mr. Ripley, the Good Born Identity films, and he's... Oops. Oh, please, they're doing just fine. He's not only one of the best actors working today, he is also an Oscar-winning screenwriter, and his new film as writer-star, Promised Land, opens this month. Please welcome Matt Damon.
Oh man, right off the bat. For those of you who didn't hear, there was a gentleman in the second row who screamed, "Go Yankees," when I walked out. I get it everywhere I go.
It's okay, we'll take care of him in the parking lot afterwards. Thank you so much for being here today. I know you're incredibly busy and you could be doing other things with your time, like heckling Argo.
Yes.
Since this is a SAG audience, I always like to start by asking, how did you get your SAG card?
I got my SAG card in 1986, which I think means I qualify for my pension now. I know Ben was 8 when he got his. I was 16 when I got mine, so he had quite a jump on me. Yeah, I remember really well. It was I paid for it with money from a TJ Maxx commercial that Ben and I did together. It was a back-to-school ad. We got cut out, but they still paid us. And I remember that was the summer that the initiation fee was always $600, and my big focus was how I was going to get $600, and the TJ Maxx commercial did it, and then they raised it to $800, and so I went to the SAG office in Boston, and then I had to turn around and I went to my father. And see, neither my mother nor my dad wanted me to do this professionally at that point. You know, they wanted me to do as much theater as I wanted and go to school and go to college. And I see their point. You know, I mean, if it were my kids, I'd be encouraging the same thing. But they never got in the way of me pursuing a professional career. But I just had to do it on my own. And so I'd go to New York with Ben on the train or on the, back then it was Eastern Airlines. They had the Pan Am shuttle and Eastern Airlines, which then became Trump Air, for any of you back on the East Coast who remember those days. But we paid for it out of our own pockets. And this was a case where I only had $600, and I went to my dad, and my dad gave me the $200. Which was a big gesture because it wasn't just the money. It was that he was saying, "Okay, I see what this means to you." And Ben and I were both very, very determined young people, and didn't feel as young as we actually were. Looking back now at a 14 and a 16-year-old, going by themselves to New York to audition for the Mickey Mouse Club, it seems kind of crazy, but. That was it, 1986.
You really auditioned for the Mickey Mouse Club?
Unbeknownst to me, yes. It's kind of a crazy story. I was told by the agent that we had at the time that we were meeting the head of Touchstone Pictures. And I was a freshman at Harvard. I was 17 years old and was so excited that I was going to meet this big shot in the movie business that I couldn't contain myself and was walking around the dorm going, "Yeah, I'm not going to be here for that class on Monday because I'm going to be in New York and meeting the head of Touchstone Pictures." And when I told everyone in the freshman dorm that I lived in, I set off for New York with Ben, and we realized something was wrong probably 30 seconds into the audition when they asked if we could dance. I said, "That is an interesting question from the head of Touchstone Pictures. Wow, you guys, what is going on?" And then they dropped the bomb on us that we were actually in an audition for the Mickey Mouse Club.
Wow.
So, and then I had to go back to college and have everyone go, "So what's the head of Touchstone Pictures like?" He's cool.
I'm curious because you did know from a young age you wanted to be an actor. Did you know you wanted this to be your career?
Yes. Yes, as much as you can know what you want to do for the rest of your life when you're 13. But that was how old I was when I when I really committed to it, and got in the union when I was 16. And I mean, my college essay, to get into school was about wanting to be an actor. And we had a great drama department in our high school, and a really special teacher, and a very rigorous, we did shows. The public school that I went to had a state-of-the-art theater that sat 750 people. So, 10 years ago, I did a play in the West End in London, and the house was about the same size as the one that I learned, did my first plays in. So, which just, gives you an idea of how seriously they took it there.
Do you remember some of those early plays and the roles you did?
Sure. The first play that I did in high school was Chushingura, the 47 Samurai. It was a kabuki play.
High school?
I played Waka Sanosuke. That was my name. I don't remember. I had a little monologue in the first act. It was a good role. It was a good sized role for a freshman. The play, I think, was 4 hours long, and the theater was not packed to the gills. It was just anybody who had kids in the play was there to watch them slog through a kabuki play, in our whiteface and everything. But but we didn't know that. I mean, so there was that freshman year. There was a summer musical every summer. We did Guys and Dolls. I was just a gambler in that. I was like, yeah. But then when my voice changed, I got the part of Pippin. That was a couple years later.
You did Pippin.
I did Pippin, yes.
Was it Pippin is always done with like some stylized thing put on it? Was it like Pippin on a spaceship?
No, in fact, this was just Pippin. Yeah, they just really did it. Although the Ben Vereen role was split up between 3 actresses.
See, there's always something.
Yeah. But that's more, it was a big cast, so they were just trying to let everybody participate, I think. The Visit.
Love that.
Yeah.
Ben
played
played
my son. Ben played my son in The Visit. Yeah. He was a freshman and I was a junior. Yeah. So.
You can still lord that over him today.
Yeah, I mean, he can lord my performance in The Visit over me. So. That play was long.
I thought you were going to say we did Neil Simon and You Can't Take It With You. And
no, we didn't. We did less traditional stuff. And then every year, in fact, every year, the drama teacher, we had a guy named Gerry, who was hugely influential in both of our lives, would write a play with the kids, and we'd go to the Massachusetts High School Drama Festival with something that we'd written every year. And the way that he taught us to write was the exact same stuff that Ben and I did, all those kind of techniques. The process was exactly the same, kind of based in improvisation, and that's how we wrote Good Will Hunting and how we've written subsequently.
Do you think that started your love of writing? Or were you doing it before then?
No, I mean, that played a big part in it. It was really fun and really exciting and exhilarating. So I'm sure that's where it started. But I mean, we really wrote Good Will Hunting out of necessity. I mean, we just needed a job, and as you all know, they don't really give those out here. So it was just 2 guys who were eager and young and had a lot of energy and a lot of creative energy, and that's it was always a big problem with L.A. and New York. Was you'd meet these other actors and it's like you're raring to go and there's nowhere to put that energy, and so it can get put in horrible places. It can get put in drugs and all that, or you can try to somehow channel it into something that feels productive. And even if nothing comes of it, it's still productive in the sense that you're working. Even if you're getting together in groups and doing scenes or taking classes or trying to cobble together a screenplay, the energy's going somewhere.
Now, you didn't graduate from Harvard
No.
because you booked an acting job, is that correct?
Yeah, I would leave there periodically. I got a few jobs while I was there, which was great because I was going to school, and so I kind of had cover, and so I had a few years where it was like I was auditioning for free, because I wasn't going to be, out on my ass if I didn't get the part. And so I got a couple things, and I would take a leave of absence and lose a semester and then come back. And the last time I did it was 1992, was I was supposed to graduate, but I hadn't. And I was in what would have been my senior year in 1993. and I got a part in Geronimo, an American Legend.
Like that was the full title.
That is the full title. And but it had the cast. It had Gene Hackman. It had Robert Duvall, and the star of the movie was Jason Patric. It was a really great group of actors, and everybody was saying it was, this was it. And so I left Harvard for good because I was sure that, I'm done with that. Like that chapter in my life, I'm on my way now. And so then that movie opened and made, I think, $4 million in its opening weekend, and it cost like 50. But I was out here already, and Ben and I were already working on the script, and so we just stayed.
So you left school because you thought Geronimo would be a big hit?
I was sure. I didn't think. I mean, there was no doubt.
So you said, bye, Harvard, and...
Yeah, but I had it. If things ever got bad, I had it in my back pocket. I could go back, and I got a lot out of my experience there. And I probably went to school for more than 4 years. I would just be at the end of a semester, and like with Geronimo, I was at the end of a semester, and I had to leave to do the movie. And the only way they would let me get credit is if I took my finals at the exact moment that they were being offered back in Cambridge. And when you're number 5 on the call sheet, you're not shutting a movie down for 3 hours 4 different times. They'll just hire somebody else. So I just had to eat the semester.
Yeah, you can't say to Robert Duvall, I have to go take my final.
Listen, I have to. Although he did say when he found out where I went to college, I heard you go to Harvard, and I said, yeah. And he goes, what the hell are you doing here? I was thinking to myself, like, there's not one person at Harvard who wouldn't think that this is cooler being here with you than like being back there. So.
That was a good Robert Duvall, by the way.
I got, who does, Billy Bob Thornton always did a good Bobby Duvall.
Yeah.
We love, I worked with him 12 or 13 years ago, and we would just tell stories of Duvall because we loved him so much and appreciate him so much. And then Bobby showed up to the set of All the Pretty Horses, and he showed up on a day where we were doing this really intense scene where I come out of prison and Henry Thomas is waiting there for me, and it's a really kind of big moment in the book and in the movie, and there was Robert Duvall, and I met with him, chatted a little bit, and went to work, and he stayed for a few hours, and then at the end I saw him, and he was walking off down this road, and he was headed to where the cars were parked, and I went to Billy, and I said, Bobby left? And he goes, yeah, and I go, oh, and he goes, no, he said to tell you something, and I said, what? And he said, tell him I said, is he really going to do it like that?
Everyone's a critic. When you moved out here and Geronimo didn't take off into the stratosphere, did you ever have to take survival jobs, or did you always make a living as an actor?
Well, I made enough. I was close a few times. Like Geronimo, that had lasted. And then Ben got a show called Against the Grain, which lasted for 6 or 7 episodes. And so between us, we had our rent covered for that year. And then I moved in with another high school buddy of mine because Ben got engaged. He was like 20, 21, I think. And that ended up not lasting. 2 months into them living together. So then he showed up at our place. And that was and then we were really running out of money, and he was on, our couch, and he's a big dude. I mean, he didn't fit. It was one of those smaller couches. Legs were on the side, and all his shit was in our living room, and it was one of those small West Hollywood bungalows where you have it's like the main room, and then the little kitchen, and then bedroom, and then another bedroom, and so our other buddy was in the back bedroom, I was in this bedroom, and Ben was in the only other room in the house where we could really congregate with all of his stuff. So we got really serious about writing. And that was the place where we sold the script.
Now, as an actor, I think a lot of people first really took notice of you in 1996, Courage Under Fire. Such a spectacular movie, opposite Meg Ryan and Denzel Washington. How did that come about? And from what I understand, you had to lose something like 40 pounds in 3 months? Yeah,
I lost a lot of weight. But you guys know what it's like. I looked at the odds, you know, like how am I even going to break into this business, right? All the good parts, you know, if you as an unknown actor to get a great role, you know, every other actor has to pass on it, right? Every other actor has to pass on it. And then it gets opened up to you and thousands of other people like you, right? And you all go. And, you know, there are a few parts, like I was looking at you know, a big part when I was younger was Primal Fear. Remember that movie with Richard Gere? And Edward Norton got the part.
After everyone passed.
Yeah, I mean, so that part became open. Every young actor knew it. I mean, when I paid with money I did not have to take dialect lessons, you know, hired a dialect coach because the kid was, you know, his alter ego was from Kentucky and he was from somewhere else, and I'd never been to Kentucky, and so, you know, we knew that was it. You know, that was going to launch somebody. There just weren't opportunities, you know, and so Courage Under Fire was one of those roles that was small. It was really it was 2 scenes, right? I had 2 scenes with Denzel, and then the rest of it was I'm the medic, and I'm, you know, Tim Guinea, an actor who I love, who's in Promised Land actually, is like bleeding out on my lap for 6 weeks we're in El Paso, and he's like moaning, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm like, I don't think the camera's on us, man. You know? But you know, so it was a really thankless job for both of us, except for those 2 scenes that I had with Denzel. So I had 2 days of work on that movie, and so I went, well, what do I do? You know, it's told in flashback. So let me see, how can I change myself? What can I do? The guy's supposed to become a heroin addict. Okay, well, so what do I do to make that seem like it happened? And the only thing I could come up with was to lose as much weight as I could, and then put it back on as fast as I could to go do the flashback stuff. And so that's what I did.
I heard that wasn't good for your health. Like your doctor was surprised.
No, it was terrible. You know, it was bad. It was bad because I didn't. You know, I asked them for a nutritionist, which was probably $1,500 or $2,500, and they said no. And you know, I don't think they, in their defense, I don't think they really knew what I was going to do. You know, and they'd probably have requests like this all the time, and they think they're vanity requests. But it was a serious request, and they turned it down. And so I went to we had a friend, we knew a guy who was also he was Austrian. I mean, funnily enough, he was Austrian, and he was trying to be an actor, but he literally, because he was Austrian, he had Arnold's accent, and he was a former bodybuilder. So he was really aiming at a small bullseye, you know, because his spot was really taken by somebody. But he put me on his program that he would do for bodybuilding shows. But they would do that program 3 weeks out. You know, they would do this really kind of reckless thing when they're just, you know, and so those guys walk on stage and like you could push it. They look strong, but you could knock them over. They're really suffering at that point. To kind of leach every bit of everything out so that the veins and the muscles pop out. So I did it for like 3.5 or 4 months, which was just too much, you know, too much. But at the same time, you know, it worked. It worked, and you know, when I got the Rainmaker a year or so later, Coppola said that he'd seen Courage Under Fire, and that made a big difference. And funnily enough, it was Edward Norton and I who were going against each other again for that. And the Courage Under Fire pushed me over the edge. And when I met Spielberg later, and he looked at me, and he said, "What?" You know, and I'd put myself on tape for Saving Private Ryan. I never heard anything. I don't think the tape ever got to him. The casting director maybe looked at it and chucked it, you know. And so I thought he'd, you know, seen it, and he said, well, you know, what do I know you from? And I said, I put myself on tape for your movie. He goes, no, I didn't see any tape. He goes, what movies have you been in? I said, I was in a movie called Courage Under Fire. He goes, you know, I turned to my wife when I saw that movie and said, that's the exact guy I want for Private Ryan. I just wish he wasn't so skinny. So.
I feel like I read a interview at the time that said like you couldn't even kiss your girlfriend because you could taste potato chips on her lips?
The oil from them, yeah. No, I mean, it went, people who have those, disorders, I got it. I totally understood it. Like, if you want to be, because I just told myself, I can't allow anything. There's no compromising, none. Like, because the second you open that door, it's a slippery slope. And I wanted to look back on it and go, I did absolutely everything I could. And now I don't look at it that way. And I mean, I'd read this quote that Anthony Hopkins had, maybe 10 years ago, where he talked about his process and how it was more economical now. It was more, he got the same amount of work done. He accomplished the same things, but he didn't suffer as much. He didn't spin his wheels so much. And that his process had just, was efficient. And that's true. That does, I've found now, I wanted to relate to it back then, and I do relate to it now, because I think back on some of the things that I did, and they were, maybe not that, because that was necessary, but some of the other things I've done, were just kind of, didn't really help the performance. They just kind of wasted my time and energy. So.
Do you have examples you'd be willing to share? Or?
Yeah, stupid things. Like, I slept with a football for a movie where I was a football player. Like, I don't know what I was thinking, I remember my roommate in college, what are you doing? And I was like, no, I'm going to hold it. You see, because if I hold it, and I don't know what the hell I was thinking.
Was that School Ties?
Yeah.
Because I believed it.
Yeah, no, but what does that have to do with anti-Semitism in the 50s, I was like totally in the wrong place. But I did always want to have some kind of physical connection to what I was doing. Yeah, so I think I definitely wasted some time.
Did you find Courage Under Fire, you mentioned two great examples, but did it start opening doors for you, or you were already kind of on your way with writing Good Will Hunting?
Well, we'd sold Good Will Hunting by the time I got Courage Under Fire.
Wow.
So, yeah, that's right. Yeah, November of '94, we sold Good Will Hunting, and Courage Under Fire, gosh, I'm going to say it was 95. Mm-hmm. It was 95, and then came out in 96.
That's amazing. How were you handling it during that time, knowing you were about to have this big year, or did you know? Did you think it might be another Geronimo?
No, Courage Under Fire, I had no, Ed Zwick was the director, and I remember when he saw the cut footage from the scenes with Denzel, and because we were in El Paso, and he came running up to me on the set, and that's when I went, okay, that it worked, it worked. And Roger Deakins was the cinematographer, oh, wow. and he had seen it, and he had seen how much weight I'd put on, and to do the flashback stuff, and so he was really excited. So those things, so I felt like, okay, well, this movie, I'll be good in this movie, but I didn't know, again, if the movie was going to do. Mm-hmm. And the movie, I don't remember how. It did okay. I don't think it wasn't a runaway success. It was just that I had things going on a lot of different fronts because of the screenplay, and but we were in development. We were sitting there in development, and at Castle Rock at the time, kind of languishing a little bit. So,
how did you get it out of development and get Gus Van Sant involved?
We came to an agreement with them whereby they agreed to give it to us in turnaround if we could sell it to somebody else for $1 million. And that someone else would agree to keep us in the roles, and if we couldn't, then we had to give it to them, and then we were out as actors, and that was a really tough decision. But we did it, thinking that there were plenty of places that would take it, because it had been a bidding war the year before when we'd sold it, and all the people who had bid on it called us back to meet with them, basically to tell us to our face, you should have come with us. We're not interested anymore. And it was Kevin Smith, who Ben gave the script to, because they'd worked together a bunch. And Ben said, will you please direct this movie? Like, we're going to lose it. And Kevin read it and said, I don't deserve to direct this movie. And he walked into Harvey's office and gave it to Harvey. Harvey hadn't read it, and Harvey read it, and the next day called us, and we were literally on the brink of losing our script. And Harvey rode in on the white horse and saved the day.
As he does.
As he does, yeah.
That's Harvey Weinstein, by the way, in case you don't know. He gets to go by one name, like Madonna.
He does, he does. He does. He does in my book, yeah, certainly.
And I know a lot has been said and written about the experience of Good Will Hunting, but could you ever have imagined that it would have such an effect on people? You touched so many lives with that movie. It was amazing.
No, you know, it's really great looking back. I mean, Ben and I had this pact that we just wanted the movie, that no matter what, we wanted to love it. And even if nobody saw it, and it was a great early lesson that, you know, because even if the movie hadn't been successful, we still would have loved it, and it would have meant as much to us. So I've, you know, not to be a horrible name dropper, but Clint Eastwood said to me a couple of years ago, I was asking him about just stuff. We were sitting on the set while they were setting up a shot, and he said, you know, people talk about my movies, you know, they say, well, this one's a masterpiece, or that one's no good, and he goes, I love all of them. He goes, and I know exactly why I made each one of them, and I wouldn't do anything differently if I had to do it again.
Are there certain movies you feel that way about? I mean, one that springs to mind that really affected me personally was Hereafter. And I know it didn't find the biggest audience, but then I talked to people who passionately love that movie.
What's interesting about that movie is I think it had exactly a 50% on Rotten Tomatoes. But it wasn't a normal 50%, because I looked at the reviews, and the people who liked it really, really liked it, and the people who didn't really, really didn't. It wasn't mediocre. You know, there was nothing, people were like, it's fine. It was, people were angry. You know, really, like, they didn't want to talk about death, they didn't want to know about any of it, and they just were angry that the movie got made. At least that's what it felt like looking at what they wrote. Whereas people who were open to that really dug it, you know, and which is great. That's a great, I will take that every time, you know, over, you know, hey, you know, 2 stars, you know what I mean? Like, no, really, we did a movie, Gus, we improvised this movie 12 years ago called Gerry, and Gus had taken out a mortgage on his house to pay for it, and it was like 15-minute stretches where nobody talked, you know, it was literally like that movie. And we went to Sundance to sell it, really so Gus could have his house back. And the reviews of that movie were, one review said, this is the most important American film of the last 20 years. But most of them said things like, and this is a quote, you will only ever see this movie if you are being tortured. And I was like, wow, now that is a review. Wow. But it really said that, you know, but that's a good, I think that's a good place to be, you know. I mean, that's much better than like, it's fine, you know. I mean, I'd really much rather have it be striking in some way than just kind of be like, whatever.
That's almost like a Spinal Tap review. I find that really hard to believe.
It was so vitriolic. I think it was so brutal that it kind of felt like Spinal Tap, because it was kind of like, well, this doesn't really happen to real people, you know. Nobody would ever really say that in a review.
Are you good about, I mean, do you like to read your own reviews? Do you need to give it time?
It's weird now, everybody's so much more aware of all aspects of the film business. You know, they do the box office reports in every newspaper. They have websites devoted to it. They really get granular with it on some of these websites. And then Rotten Tomatoes, where everyone goes, it's kind of the default place where people go to, you know, just kind of get a sense. Like, you know, it's like, you know, all right, 77%. Yeah, all right, I'll go see it. You know, so I think you have to kind of be aware of what's being said. And they're hard, you know, it's hard to not read reviews. I mean, it is for me. I'm very capable of reading them and forgetting them. You know, I will say that. And I'll skim them, you know, because they come out in this giant batch, like when the movie opens, and suddenly it's overnight, you know, if you're a 25% or a 95%, and you really, it's just an overnight thing, and it happens that fast. But, you know, I remember when Ben did The Sum of All Fears with Morgan Freeman, This name dropping is horrible. I'm sorry. But all my stories are anecdotal, so I mean, all my knowledge is anecdotal. So, but Ben asked Morgan that question, and Morgan said, he didn't read them, and Ben said, really? And Morgan said, here's why. And he quoted a review from the New York Times about his performance in Shakespeare in the Park and Taming of the Shrew in like the 1980s, and it was mean. Right. And then he launched into another verbatim critique of Driving Miss Daisy, which was absolutely glowing and wonderful, and you know, you would think he was the second coming. And he said, that's the same reviewer said those two things about me. So at that point, I just decided not to read them anymore. You know? Ben was so excited, he called me, he was like, we have permission to never read reviews again from Morgan Freeman. You know? But it's still hard. I mean, and things have changed even since then. That was in the 2000 or 2001, and I mean, it's just the internet. It's just very hard to, I won't read comments that people post because those are awful.
Yeah, no,
they're just awful, and they're anonymous, and that's really chicken shit. Like, you know what I mean? I really don't believe in that. I mean, if you have something to say, you should say it. But they're just. I don't understand how somebody could be that angry about total strangers. Yeah. That they would actually take the time out of life, their own life, their one life. This is what I'm gonna do. I hate your movie, and I hate you. So no, I learned I think I probably read comments once and then no, I'm not doing that again.
What's the strangest or funniest thing you've read about yourself, either in comments or something from the tabloids that just made you laugh? You've stumped me. I actually don't. Or maybe it doesn't make you laugh. I mean, maybe it's really horrible.
No, I remember something. Just to bring this back around to the Yankees for a second. In 2004, when the Red Sox won the World Series, before that happened, there was a game in Yankee Stadium, the second game of the playoff series, and I got invited. Somebody had a ticket, and I went with Casey Affleck, and we were invited, and I wore a. They do these specialty hats. So this was like a St. Patrick's Day Red Sox hat. So it was a green hat with the Boston symbol on it. It got printed in the newspaper up in Boston the next day that I'd gone into Yankee Stadium and didn't wear my Red Sox hat, right? My publicist, Jennifer Allen, who's been my publicist since 1996, I get sent these things and I never respond to any of them, we just never have a comment. I mean, no comment. I called her up and was like, this is an outrage. I was like George Bush the First, in the Kuwait thing. This will not stand, you know what I mean? And she was like, Jesus, okay, well, you want to make a statement? I was like, I absolutely want to make a statement. So we wrote out a statement and sent it to the Boston Herald, who'd said this, and they retracted it.
You felt justified.
I did. But the other stuff I really do forget. I'm sure there's something weird or stupid a lot of stuff that's been written, but I either don't read it or I read it and forget about it.
Just to sort of wrap up the Good Will Hunting years, I talked to Ben recently, and he said you guys were so young, and the whole experience with the Oscars, with all of the acclaim, really to him has been a blur. Yeah. Was it the same for you? Yeah. Or do you remember much about that period of time?
It's really a blur. And it was just too much. It really was too much to process for, because the thing about fame is that people say you change, but it's not that. It's what happens is the world is exactly the same. It's exactly the same as it was yesterday. But it does change in relation to you and only you, right? So suddenly you walk into a room and everybody looks at you. And suddenly it's weird. It's really weird. But you know intellectually that the same things still matter, you know. It's not that important that the world has changed in relationship to you. It's only important to you because these are the eyes you look out of, and they're the only eyes you look out of, right? But nothing else, it's not really that important. So you hear people bitching about it, and everybody's reaction was just like mine always was, like, oh, shut up, you know? But what they're saying is basically that something strange is happening to me. I'm living in the same world, but everything, nobody treats me the same as they did before. And even if that's good treatment or friendly treatment, it's still very, very hard to come to terms with because your life is completely different. Your primary relationships are always the same, you know, and they're based on the same things. But the new ones are you know, you have that you're bringing into the relationship.
Looking back, I mean, at your filmography around the time, you made a lot of really smart choices in your career. When it could have gone in a different direction, you could have fallen down that rabbit hole. What do you sort of credit with helping you keep a clear head?
Well, there's a lot of luck. You know, Ben got branded as the guy who wanted to be the big action star. The reason that happened was because Good Will Hunting came out, and the next summer, Armageddon and Saving Private Ryan came out. And so I literally had this patina of seriousness. And Ben had this kind of, hey, he's the popcorn, he's the movie star guy. The reality was, when we'd taken those jobs, you know, Good Will Hunting hadn't come out, nobody knew who we were, and either of us would have taken the other job in a second. You know, I remember being in Harvey Weinstein's office when Ben asked him if he could call this director, Michael Bay, and please put in a good word, and say that I'm good in Good Will Hunting. Can you just tell him? You know, because he doesn't, you know, he's only seen, Ben had been in Dazed and Confused, he'd been in some of Kevin's movies, but Michael Bay, I guess, was going like, well, who is this guy? You know, and Harvey said, I absolutely will. Harvey instantly recognized what that would do for Ben's career if he could get in that movie, and he went, yeah, I'm happy to make the call for you. But that's where we were, you know, and then suddenly we literally became famous, and then these movies came out, and so that kind of, you know, those became our identities for a little while, but none of it was true. You know, it was just how it happened.
You were really good, too, at combining comedy and drama. I mean, obviously you did serious films like Departed and Invictus, but then you would shake it up with things like Stuck on You and Dogma.
Some people don't know that's a comedy. I love that movie, personally. But yeah. If you want to talk about reviews.
How can you hate Stuck on You?
I don't know. I mean, that's why I feel like if people have no heart, how can that... I love the experience of making it, and I love those guys, and I met my wife making that movie. Oh, really? So yeah. So it was a big win for me.
Which is harder for you, comedy or drama, or they each have their challenges?
It really is about the director for me. If the director, you know, really understands the tone of the movie, then it's all, you know, they're just like the greatest safety net. I remember doing The Informant, and Steven Soderbergh, there was this scene in The Informant where I had to apologize to the entire town, you know, about what, you know, for what I'd done, and we had the transcript of what the guy said, and so it's like 8 o'clock, and we're somewhere in Illinois, Springfield, I think we were in. I think it was the actual courtroom, and I was in his actual chair, and I stood up and I said to the town exactly what the man, Mark Whitaker, had said, and I got choked up, and as I imagined he had, and it was the first take, and I thought it was really great, and Steven said, cut, and he walked over. He was about as far away as these cameras are, because we were starting with like a master. And he walked over, and people kind of cleared out, and he just comes and he sits on the desk. I'm in the chair, in the defendant's chair, and he kind of leans up on the table, and he's like, no. He's like, wait a minute, what do you mean, no? What do you mean, no? And he goes, no. And I go, no, wait, hold on, hang on, Steven, wait. I think that's how this happened. I said, I think, and I said, and I really felt something. Like, you can say no all you want, but I know what's real, and I know what I felt. And he goes, no, you're missing the point. It's just that you're in the wrong movie.
Wow.
And I went, okay, get me in the right movie. And he thought about it for a second. And then he goes, do it like an awards acceptance speech. And he got up and he walked back to the camera. And I was like, of course, like, this is the guy's moment.
Yeah.
You know, this is it. The whole town is there. He has an audience. Like, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to him, you know? And so we did the scene again, and but that is literally a director saving my bacon, you know, because the scene wouldn't have fit, you know? And in that vein, there's a great story which I got from Robert Redford when I worked with him, because I'd always heard it and I wanted to know if it was true. And the story was that the great scene with Donald Sutherland, when Mary Tyler Moore comes down the stairs and he's sitting at the table, and it's so simple, and it's just this shot of him, and he basically says that he thinks he doesn't love her anymore, like their marriage is over. And the choice, he's brilliant in that scene, and it's so beautiful and simple. And I had heard that it was a reshoot, you know? And so I asked Redford, is that true? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, what's the deal? What happened? And he goes, we shot that scene, and Donald did, in a vacuum, he goes, it was one of the most virtuosic pieces of acting I've ever seen in my life. Snot was flying and tears. He said it was just amazing. It like shell-shocked people on the crew. They were applauding afterwards. And Donald came up to Redford and said, well, you know, what'd you think? And Redford said, we don't have it. And Sutherland evidently said, no. He said, what just happened. He said, and that was one of the most significant moments of my life, what I just did. You know, that is the culmination of all of these years of doing this. Like, that's the best thing I've ever done. What are you talking about? And Redford said, okay, I'll make a deal with you. We'll wrap this scene. We'll move on. I will cut this into the movie. And if you want to reshoot it, we'll reshoot it.
Wow. And
Sutherland said, great. And a few months later, he cut the picture together and he was showing it to him. And they got to that scene, and as Redford said to me, Sutherland leapt out of his chair and said, I got it, I know. And he didn't even have to see the rest of the movie. And what it was that when they came back with a skeleton crew, I don't even think Mary Tyler Moore was there.
Wow.
He went through that same thing that he'd done publicly for the crew. He did it in his trailer, right? And he went through all of that. And then he came out and he sat at the table, because the scene's about the realization, the understanding that it's over. So you've gone through the horrific, you know, the emotional part, and you're just tired, and you're just honest. And he just did like 2 or 3 takes, you know, simply just, and that was it. And it's beautiful in the movie, and it's so simple. But again, it's that thing, because actors go by moments, you know, and we know when we're in the moment and when it's real. But you need somebody who can keep everything in this larger context, because at the end of the day, you're part of the story. You know, you're not the story, and you have to serve the story. But it's the director's job to make sure you're in the story. You know.
Speaking of simple little things, one of my favorite parts of The Informant is when Mark's just been given like some horrible news, and you just move your wig ever so slightly. And I have to admit, embarrassingly enough, I didn't realize it was a wig until that point.
Well, there's a good story behind that, because Whitaker had a hairpiece, and there was, in Kurt Eichenwald's book, they talk about it a lot, and apparently the FBI guys, they were 50-50 split on whether it was a piece or not, right? So we experimented with all these different ones to make, you know, because we needed it to look like, we wanted that exact thing for people to go like, is that a... And so one day on the set, I was sitting there talking to Steven, and I had an itch, you know, and so as I'm talking to him, so imagine the hat's the wig, I just went, yeah, and so anyway, you know, and the thing moved like that. And he goes, what just happened? And I go, what are you talking about? He goes, do that again. And I went like this, and he goes, I got to find a place to put that in the movie. And so the reveal of the piece was at that really low moment, he just kind of sits there and he kind of adjusts his thing. But it's one of those things one of those accidents that happen all the time that are really fun.
Everyone else was like, how could you not know that was a wig?
Which is what they all said at the end. All the guys, who from the FBI who had thought, no, that's his hair. That's what the other guys said to them.
In addition to having a sense of humor on screen, you also appear to have a very good sense of humor about yourself off screen. I'm thinking mostly of Sarah Silverman's video.
Right.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say it. I'm fucking Matt Damon, I can say? Okay.
Well, I mean.
How did that come about, and how did you know it would work? I mean, when you went into
I
that...
didn't. I didn't. I just thought it was funny. Like, we were trying to figure out, the last piece that we'd done was, for the Kimmel show, was a recreation of the Bourne Ultimatum trailer, and I really love this piece. It's up on the internet, but the idea is that Jimmy keeps bumping me from his show. Now I'm getting bumped from my own movies because in this trailer, Guillermo shows up dressed like Jason Bourne doing the dialogue, and we literally bump into each other in the middle of the trailer, and I'm like, wait a minute, are you from Kimmel? Now I'm getting bumped from my own movies. And it was really fun and really funny, and we were trying to figure out where to go from there, and what could kind of top that. And Wayne McClammy, who directed that spot, called with the idea, and I guess that Sarah had. And the original idea was it was Jimmy's 40th birthday, and they were going to have a surprise show for him. So he had agreed to come out and not know who any of the guests were, and not know, literally not know what the show was. The entire thing was a surprise. And the first guest was going to be Sarah Silverman, and she was going to come out and say, I'd love you, and it's been great, because they used to be in a relationship together, and it's really, and I just, there's just one little thing I think I just want to tell you, but I put it into a video, and so, yeah, great, and they were going to play I'm fucking Matt Damon. And then the writer's strike happened, and so his birthday came during the strike, so obviously the show was dark, nobody could write for it, and so they just did it, they just put it on his show at kind of some other moment. Sarah just came out and did it. But it was like, I got a call from those guys, they pitched me the idea, and I went, that's really funny. I think it's funny, maybe, but look, if it's not funny, nobody's going to, it's not going to people aren't going to keep watching it, so it'll just die on the vine. So there's not really anything you're risking. I mean, the only thing you're risking is, and I realized at the time, my oldest would have been 7, and I literally got up to shoot the video. Shooting call was 7 o'clock because I had to leave it at 9:45 because I had a parent-teacher conference. And I remember that, so we had to work really fast. There were a lot of shots in that video, so we were hustling to get them all, and dance numbers and all this stuff. I had to record the song that morning because I had a couple lines in the song, and so we did it, and it was like a fever dream. It went really fast, and then I got in my car to go to the parent-teacher conference, and I'm driving along, hey, parent-teacher conference, I think I'm going to make it. And then I thought, oh my God, I just did I'm fucking Matt Damon. I can't do this shit anymore. I got, what am I these people are going to see this. I got a kid in school, I got to go face the teachers, and luckily the teachers really liked it. It turns out teachers have a sense of humor, so I wasn't ostracized from my community. Yeah.
Did Jimmy really not know it was going to air? Was it?
No, he had no idea. He had the original idea was great, and I wish we could have done it, because that would have been a total surprise among, in the middle of a show full of surprises.
And then did you know that they were working on a response video, or did that come as a surprise to you?
I was in Morocco. I was shooting The Green Zone. And I called Ben for some other reason. And he's like, dude. He's like, I'm in a recording studio, dude. And I was like, what are you doing in a recording studio? And he's like, I'm doing a response to your video. And I'm like, really? And he goes, Harrison Ford just walked in. He was like, this thing is huge. And I was like, well, why the fuck do you get a budget and I don't? What the hell? You know? There's like 6 of us in the Delano Hotel in Miami with like 2 hours to shoot our thing. Like, you got Harrison Ford in yours? What the hell? So, and that was like, if you've ever seen it, that's a big, the production value is insane on that thing. They had, you know, they had the whole We Are the World ending with like, I mean, it's really good.
Another meme that you're associated with a lot is the Team America.
Yes.
Yes. Now, did you have any kind of warning that you were going to be in that?
No. I wish I did. I mean, I love those guys. I think they're really, really funny, and I know people, they offend some people. I think they're amazing, and I love Team America. I think it's hysterically funny. I signed that picture of the puppet. I signed more than any other picture. Like, you know, when you see the autograph people that come and they have a stack of pictures, there's like half of them will be the puppet. And they always ask, can you please write Matt Damon? Yeah, I know. All right, A, you know. So, but I never talked to Trey and Matt about it, and you know, but I did. I'm a big fan of theirs.
It is very hard not to introduce you as Matt Damon.
I know. Thank you for resisting me.
Yeah, well, until now. So I should get to your current project, Promised Land, which is reteams you with Gus Van Sant. You co-wrote with John Krasinski. How did this collaboration come about?
Well, John came to me with the idea. I met John through Emily Blunt, his wife, and yeah, the Adjustment Bureau, and my wife and I just became really close with them, and we would hang out with them a lot. And John is one of those guys. He really reminds me of when I first met George Clooney. He was really known for, he was the guy from ER. Like, everyone's like, hey, that guy. Oh yeah, George. Yeah, he's the guy from ER. And but if you hung around him and talked about movies, you realize, like, this is not the guy from ER. This guy is going places, and he's really, really smart and good. And like Steven Soderbergh had done Out of Sight with him and instantly formed a company with him, and everybody at the time was saying, well, why would Steven Soderbergh form a company with the guy from ER, you know? But it was because he'd gone through a script with him and taken his notes, and you know, and realized where George was headed, and that's how I feel about John. I mean, John's brilliant on his show, but you know, that character that he plays, and that, you know, and he's a brilliant comic actor, but the breadth and scope of his talent is huge, and in 12 years, I think we'll be looking at him, you know, because he can write, he can direct, he can produce, he can act, he can really do anything, and so I instantly started looking for stuff to do with him, and he had this idea, and so we sat down, and he was doing the show, and I was doing Cameron Crowe's movie, We Bought a Zoo, and so we would work on our day jobs during the week, and then Saturday mornings he would show up for breakfast at the place that I had rented, because I had my 4 kids, so the default kind of writing place was my house on the weekends, and he would just kind of suck it up with the kids climbing all over us, and like, and we would write all day Saturday and Sunday, and then we'd revise during the week and take notes, and then come back with everything and start fresh the next Saturday morning. And things just happened really fast. You know, it became clear that we were going to make this movie. That there's a weird thing that happens when you write, particularly the way we write. You know, and the only times I've written with actors, and you know, in that process of improvising, the characters really do start to talk back, and that's when it gets really exhilarating, because you're both playing all the characters, but you start to feel how they would all respond in these situations, and it's fun, and it's funny, and so you laugh a lot, and you get and it just you know, and then you blurt it all out onto a page, and then, you know, revise and that's it, but we hit that point where the characters were really coming alive pretty quickly.
Did he come to you and say, I have an idea about fracking, or?
No, he came to see, we had been talking about, when we weren't talking about movies, this idea about American identity, and like what is going on in the country right now, and John had been ruminating on it, and he had this idea, and he went to Dave Eggers, the great writer Dave Eggers, who he knew from Away We Go, the film that John did, the Sam Mendes film, that Dave wrote. And so the two of them started hashing stuff out, but Dave eventually had to leave because he was going to go write his book. I mean, he's an incredibly prolific writer. He's got a lot of things going on at once, and so he couldn't write the movie. So John had this thing, and he comes to me. He's like, "Well, what do you think? Do you want to do this?" And I was like, "Well, let's sit down and talk about it." And in the course of like those first couple sessions, it was like, "Wow, this could really happen." And so we wrote the script, in a few months. We had a draft that was good enough to send to Frances McDormand, because that was who we were writing for.
Oh, really?
For the lead woman, yeah. And then she said yes. She read it and she said yes. So that was a huge validation for us. And so then we had the three main characters, and we knew the actors who were playing them. So we just went and did it.
One of the things I love about this movie is it's a current topic, like the energy crisis, but it really is a character drama.
Right.
Was it a hard sell after you had all these elements in place? Or once you got Gus on board, did that make things easier?
No, I mean, once we had Gus, because I was originally going to direct it, and then I couldn't because of my schedule, and then we got Gus, which was great. And we like to joke that my biggest contribution as a producer was firing myself as the director because we got Gus Van Sant. But then the three of us plus Chris Moore, who also produced Good Will Hunting, and produced this with us, we went and did this, the financing meetings here in town, and sat with the big, Focus, who eventually bought it, and Fox Searchlight, and there were probably five or six meetings we had, and it was just about trying to figure out who we could get, who we really felt would be great creative partners, and we thought we needed about $18 million to make the movie. It turned out we came in under budget a little bit. And a lot of that's because Gus is so efficient, because he's so experienced, but I would have been way over budget. But we settled on Focus because for one thing, the person who runs Focus is James Seamus, who's a producer and a writer, and it really helped. We had a real shorthand with him because he's been under the hood of the car before, so we had the script got better when they got involved. They really were helpful, and they were just great partners for us. And because we wanted to go fast, we sold it in January, and we were shooting in April.
Wow.
And there were grammar mistakes all over the screenplay. Really, there were. And but Seamus is, he gets it. He's been there, and so he could see where we were going.
This has such an amazing cast. I mean, Hal Holbrook, Scoot McNairy shows up, Titus Welliver, and you mentioned Frances. How involved were you in the cast scene, and was it just a matter of going out to people you knew about?
Yeah, in Scoot's case, we didn't know about Scoot. In fact, when I saw Argo in March, right before we started shooting, I had to come out here, and Ben showed me Argo. It was a rough cut of Argo, and Scoot was in it, and he was great. And I was like, I thought we discovered Scoot. How do you know about Scoot? And he said Andrew Dominic had called him when he did Killing Me Softly, and said, "Mate, there's an actor in my movie who you need to put in your movie, mate. You wouldn't believe how good he is. His name is Scoot McNairy." And Ben was like, "What is a Scoot McNairy?" And he's like, "Trust me." So Ben read Scoot and cast him immediately. Scoot came about because Gus was auditioning people, and if we couldn't be in the room for the audition, they were taped, and we would get a batch of tapes at the end of the day on the computer, not by snail mail. So they'd get emailed to us, and so we'd sit there and watch all the actors, and Gus would have highlighted the ones that he really had an eye on. And the day Scoots came in, it was like, you stop everything you're doing and watch this guy. And we, he was reading a different part. The part that he ended up getting was written for a 60-year-old guy.
Wow.
And we just rewrote it immediately. We just said, well, there's no reason he can't be 30. The idea was the guy had lost his son in Iraq and was there on this farm raising the grandson. And we said, all right, it's the nephew, and he lost his brother, and we're done. Like,
wow.
Yeah. And Hal, we wrote Hal's part for somebody needed to be from, the previous generation, the former America, to kind of speak to where we've come from and where we are, but in an exceedingly simple and honest and genuine way. And Hal is 88 years old now. He's just the consummate actor. I mean, he's had this Mark Twain show that some of you may have seen. He's been doing the Mark Twain show. He hasn't missed a year. He's been doing it for 58 years. And we had to book his dates around his show.
Really?
Because he'd have to go to Phoenix, or he'd have to go to, and he just goes to these places and does his one-man show. He's been doing it for 58 years. And so he's just one of those guys, one of those few people who get to that point of total mastery, who just can just be there and be completely convincing, and we were very lucky to get him. Yeah.
Now, working with someone like Hal Holbrook, and you've worked with Robert De Niro, and I mean, just about everyone, do you ever get intimidated by anyone?
No, I mean, not intimidated, really excited, like nervous, but not nervous because Hal doesn't put off any, he's such a positive person and such a team player, that he doesn't put off anything that would be intimidating. He's the opposite. He's incredibly welcoming. He's a gentleman, but excited and nervous in the sense that what I want to see him do this. I get to be here this close when he does it, and what a privilege that is. That's a moment in my life that it's why I'm lucky to do this. John was there and Gus was there, right behind the camera, and he'd do a take, and we'd just turn around and look at each other like, oh my God, that just happened. It was just a really, very, very positive experience. But no, intimidating, I mean, I'm trying to think, it is intimidating. I was intimidated working with De Niro, and I think he deals with that a lot.
Yeah.
And does everything he can to disarm it. But there's still just a hump, you got a hurdle you have to clear, where you just have to get over that, and it doesn't happen right away.
Well, you had De Niro as a director, too, which has to be doubly intimidating.
Yeah, he gives you a note, and it's just like, you really have to go to that place where you go like, am I, because it's easy to doubt yourself. And when somebody you really admire gives you a note, you can go to that place where you're like, oh my God, he thinks I'm terrible. He thinks I'm terrible. Robert De Niro thinks I stink. Oh my God, I can't feel my feet. Or you can go, look, this is how we make movies, and this is how we make theater. This is what we do. He's doing his job. He's helping me do my job, and just come on, keep going. But it is, sometimes that's a problem. Yeah.
I remember when he did The Good Shepherd, Angelina Jolie told me that she actually auditioned for that role, which kind of shocked me. I imagine, when was the last time you had to audition?
It's been a while. Yeah, it's been a while.
Good.
Though Coppola always said, he always said, I don't understand when actors, or people who haven't auditioned in a while don't audition. He said, I always figure you need to audition the director. If they're giving you the chance to audition, you should do it for the same reason the director's doing. Go into it going, I want to see what you got, and can I work with you? And I'd never heard anybody say it that way, because though I will say about auditions, like I always had a chip on my shoulder. You get rejected so much that I always kind of went in kind of ready to pick a fight. And it wasn't until Good Will Hunting that I realized that the people who are doing the auditioning desperately want you to be great. because it solves so many of their problems if you just come in and grab the role. Like Scoot came in and it was just like, okay, rewrite the role for him and it's just his, and wow, we're going to get to watch him do that. And so if I went back to audition, I'd be thinking about it in a different way.
Do you remember, did you have any bad auditions?
Yeah, I mean hundreds.
Do you remember your worst one? Or have you blocked it out?
No, I mean, the really bad ones, oftentimes it's just like you don't even get a call back from the casting director. And those are ones that are just, but that's okay because they're so bad or you're so wrong for the part that it's just you get snuffed out. Like the more painful ones are the ones where you get close. That is much, much, much more painful because then you have hope. Then they think I might be right for this, and all that work you put in, and you never know. I mean, it's just, I have a lot of those. I mean, I had a lot, that kept me going for years, was actually getting callbacks. Because you go, okay, well, the business is telling me, or the people who do this, these casting directors, or this director, or, is speaking back to me and saying, you should keep doing this, Those ones where you get rejected out of hand, like you walk in, you walk out, and Ben and I used to call it getting okay thanks. How'd it go today? Oh, fuck, I got okay thanks. Because that's what they do. They go, okay, thanks. And turn around, like walk out. So we just call it, and if you're going through it with other people, then it's cool, because we all get okay thanks, then you're never going to be right for every role, and you take the experience and try to build off it or get something out of it. But the more painful ones were definitely, Primal Fear or things like that, where you go, that is, whoever plays this role is going to be launched, and and talk about, I think the right person gets the part too, The right guy always gets the part. I was supposed to be in Milk. I was going to be Josh Brolin's character.
Really?
Yeah, Gus called me up and sent me the script. I'm bawling my eyes out reading that script. It was so beautiful. I said, I'm in, I got all the research materials. He sent me all this footage of Dan White, and and then the movie pushed because of Sean Penn's schedule for a couple months. It was a very minor push. It was like, we're not going to start in November, we're going to start in January. But in January, I had to go do the Green Zone, and the writer's strike was looming, and so I literally couldn't, it was a complete conflict. So. And then I saw what Josh Brolin did, and I went, right guy got the part, what can I say? I would have loved to have been in that movie, but the movie didn't suffer because I wasn't in it,
Same thing with The Fighter and Christian Bale's part.
Yeah, now that's the right guy got the part. Yeah. Definitely, the right guy got the part.
I just want to take a couple quick questions from the audience. Again, apologies if I butcher your name. I've been there. Question from Perry wants to know, to date, what's the most emotionally taxing role you've had to play?
Courage Under Fire probably took the most out of me, just in terms of it was really hard. It was a really good lesson in that most of the work you do when you're preparing, nobody ever knows about. And it's literally between you and yourself. And nobody cares, and nobody ever will care. But if you're vigilant in your time when nobody's looking, that's the work in preparation that pays off the most. And that was a really good lesson for me to have when I was 25, because that's really helped me. To push myself when there's no, because it's like a 4-month thing, and you want to take a night off sometimes, but at that time in my career, I shouldn't have, and I didn't, and that paid off. So, but it came at a price, certainly.
James wants to know, when preparing for a role, do you ever get private coaching?
Yeah, certainly with things like dialect and things like, depending on the movie, what's great is if you have enough prep time and they're willing to give things to you, like, for those Bourne movies, I I was terrified of those because I was the guy from Good Will Hunting and The Talented Mr. Ripley. I was not an action guy. And so I really trained as hard as I could, doing everything from firearms training for hours and hours and hours at a time. And the great thing about it is they give you access to these experts. And these people are ready. If you can get them on the payroll, they'll just do it as much as you want. And so all of that stuff, to try to make all of that stuff second nature, are just believable. I mean, it's a magic trick. Like, I remember there was a line in the Bourne script that Tony Gilroy had written that the first time he touches the gun, he throws it down because he realizes how comfortable it is in his hand, and he just instantly knows he's spent thousands and thousands of hours with this thing. And so I just got a replica gun, and besides going to the range, just would sit there, just when I was watching television, just dropping the magazine out and loading it and dropping it and loading it, and just so that I didn't have to look at it, and just little things, just holding it so that it got comfortable in my hand. Coppola's a big believer in that. There was a scene in The Rainmaker where I'm supposed to pick up a gun, and I'm really agitated, and I run and I pick up the gun, and he'd put it in a freezer. And he'd done it for a long time. He'd put it in a freezer. And he would do things like that. He put rocks in my shoes in a scene where he wanted me uncomfortable. And then he said, just walk normally, And that was a really good lesson. And, rather than trying to, like when you're drunk, you're trying to act sober,
yeah.
right? Or when you're uncomfortable, you're trying to be comfortable. So make yourself uncomfortable and then try to be comfortable. It's a lot, you don't have to think about it as much. But so coaching, I don't get acting coaching, but I get coaching in all those other things that make up the performance.
Victor wants to know, what would you have done if you weren't an actor?
I probably would have just been a writer, but I would have loved to have been a director, but I don't know how I would have made it there. All of the knowledge I have about directing comes from watching directors, and that's a big benefit of being an actor, is you get to go watch these people in their processes. Other directors don't get to watch each other.
Yeah.
So directors oftentimes ask me about other directors, because they all know how to do it, but they know how to do it the way they know how to do it. So there's a real kind of good thing you get as an actor to be able to see all that.
We have a lot of questions. Probably half this stack is wanting to know if you're going to be collaborating with Ben again.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know on what, but yeah, I mean, we're the great thing is we have this little company together, and so now my partner in the company is the hottest director in Hollywood. So that's really good for our little company, because people are sending us a lot of material. And so we're looking at stuff. We've got a couple things we've been developing that we've been talking about, but we really want it to, whatever it is, it's that Good Will Hunting rule. We want to make sure that we love it. So we have our eyes open. We'll see.
Something that you guys could both act in, or you're open to?
Either way, I mean, I would love to be directed by him. I think that would be a lot of fun. And he's clearly a fantastic director. And I'd love to direct him. He was in actor jail for a while. I mean, I remember talking to him 10 years ago when he was on the cover of, those magazines every week. And no one knew more than him what a disaster it was. He said, I'm in the worst place you can be. He goes, I sell magazines and not movie tickets, And it was just a big hole, and it just took him a decade, but he dug his way out. And I know what he wants is to work. He loves acting, and he's at his best when he trusts the director. And so he wants some directors that he can trust to work with. So I'd love to direct him in something, and now I'm sure his performance in The Town and then his performance in Argo are so good that now the big directors, I think, are starting to call and want to hire him just as an actor.
Finally, Sherilyn wants to know, which of your movies does your family like to watch the most?
My kids, well, there's only like a couple of them they can see.
30 Rock, maybe.
Yeah. Let's see. I mean, they like I played one of those little krill in Happy Feet too, so they've seen that a couple times. They like that one. Yeah.
That's right. Fantastic work.
That and The Departed.
Well, congratulations again on another great film.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for taking time to be with
I
us today.
appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Okay.
Have you